All right. Welcome back to the Financial Advocacy Podcast. I am your host, David Kinder, registered financial consultant, charter life underwriter, with my co-hosts, Mike Moffat and Kurt Gibbs. This week, actually over the past week or so, we've had quite a fun things going on. We had Tom Hegna last week, which was wonderful to have a guest of his importance and his posture, prestige, whatever. I can't think of it. Positioning. So that was a really neat episode. If you guys missed it, hop back onto the podcast. You'll find it on the YouTube channel. You'll find it on SoundCloud. And it was episode lucky number 13, where we had Tom Hegna. This week for me, I was on a podcast or show. I don't know what they really want to call it, but I was on one with David Walker, the Honorable David Walker, former U.S. Comptroller of the United States, and with past author or co-author of The Millionaire Next Door, William Danko. And we're talking about Kamala Harris and the $35 trillion debt. So I thought that was very timely. And that was a fun thing. Then I was invited to go into someone else's podcast that was related to this topic. And we're going to be talking about exposing fiduciaries. And I don't mean criminal, although we'll talk about criminal activity. What I mean is, what is the agenda? They all talk about that fiduciary interest is all about best interest. And I'm here to prove, I'm going to decouple all this stuff, that it's not about best interest. There's a whole different standard and agenda at play here. And in preparing for this, I've got about 4.5 pages of notes. So I'm going to apologize to you guys. When you need to chime in, you need to interrupt me and say, David, I got something to add to that, whatever it is, because I have got so much to share. And while technically we don't have a time limit, I do want to get it done in a timely manner. And for our consumers that are listening, in a way, I apologize. This is all industry talk, but it does impact you and the type of advice you get from the different kinds of advisors and how they're promoting themselves. So the first thing I want to do is I want to give an example, 2 different examples of marketing of how fiduciaries typically market. And the first one is the very mild one. So I'm going to play this video. This is a CNBC video or CNBC ad for someone who is promoting themselves as a fiduciary. Let me share this.
Don't understand the difference between an advisor and a broker. An advisor, in our view, should follow the fiduciary standard, which means they are legally obligated to put the best interest of their client ahead of their own. The majority of the industry, roughly 80%, does not follow the fiduciary standard. So that's a great question to ask your investment advisor. A lot of people criticize Wall Street rightly, in our view, for getting ripped off, for putting them in products and investment advice that is not suitable for them. And the fiduciary standard, in our view, is a way to resolve that, because the advisor is legally beholden to that standard.
Now, I think that's a bunch of hogwash in most cases. First of all, do people get ripped off? Yes. Do people get placed in inappropriate products? Yes. There's people who don't always act in the client's best interest at all times, as they should. But they conflating best interest with fiduciary duty, because they're 2 different things. Anybody in any sales position anywhere, I don't care if you're selling cars, you can have your client's best interest at heart. You do not have to be told to be a fiduciary under fiduciary law to do the right thing by the client. But it's a very powerful marketing tactic that they use. And quite frankly, if I was in that camp, I would use it, because it's a good wedge. We call it a wedge. How do we separate a client from their existing broker or insurance agent or whatever? Yes, that would be a wedge that I would drive home. But it's also not very factual, I believe. Now, I'm going to share another video. This is of a firm that's local to me. I found it a while ago. And what I like is how they exaggerate some of this. So let me share this one. This one's a little bit more fun, but more damning.
The Taylors worked hard and have created substantial wealth. And now they have a choice to make. Do we entrust our money to a Wall Street broker or to a private wealth advisor? And what's the difference? Wall Street brokers and private wealth advisors are held to very different standards. Did you know that a broker doesn't have to disclose conflicts of interest or put his client first? He only needs to sell investments that could be considered suitable. The Wall Street broker also gets paid more depending on which investment he sells. And if he can meet his sales quota, he could win that dream vacation paid for by the Wall Street Investment Company. It's not his fault, but the incentives make sure brokers are paid to protect and make profits for their company above all else. On the other hand, a private wealth advisor is a fiduciary who doesn't work for commissions and is legally required to put their clients' interests ahead of their own, even when it means making less money. Before implementing a private wealth plan, a fiduciary will listen and understand the client's specific goals and concerns. With so much at stake, the Taylors chose to work with a true fiduciary, Pacific Capital, an award-winning private wealth advisory firm. Together, they created a strategy that gives them confidence and peace of mind for their future. Now, the Taylors are enjoying the life they always dreamed about, without worrying about their money or the markets. Leave the stress behind and start building your legacy with Pacific Capital. What are you waiting for? Let's get started today.
All right. I'm not doing an ad for them, but you can tell the extreme bias that's in there. It's basically saying, we have your best interest at heart. Everybody else sucks but us. But that's my line. Everybody else sucks out there but us. Anyway, I'm sorry. I had to take that. What do you guys think of those two videos here? I want your commentary here. Unmute.
Go ahead, Michael. I'll defer to you first.
So you're going to make me go first, huh?
I'm going to try not to get too spun up on it myself, just because having played on both sides of the fence, I guess I'm going to go first. It's amazing how, as you mentioned, David, really to kind of kick us off here, that marketing play on words. There's a lot of there's so many avenues that fiduciary wants to take you down, and when really we're all in the same. We could all be in the same boat. We all need to be doing the exact right thing for our clients every single time that we're sitting in front of them. And there's a handful of people out there, I think, and I think that's a small number, that actually need to get so deep into the weeds that they need to actively manage money. So I'm probably going to step on a lot of people's, toes out there with some of these comments. But I just think that, and views, I just think that's really a niche market that only a select number of people out there actually need. What people need is they need somebody that's going to advocate for, obviously their best interest always. And they need to totally understand and be committed to trying to understand what they're getting involved in from the start. I think that's where, the fiduciary word gets thrown around a lot, is that they're the only ones that can provide that information. They're the only ones that can convey that message in a way that's appropriate for you and your money. It's just over the years, it's just really gotten it's kind of like the political scene with things. The play on words is just it's out of control with the fiduciary standard, the rules that they want to implement, what you can say, what you can't say, what you can't talk about. It's just you should be able to freely speak with your client about their situation, which is going to be unique and different than anyone else that you're going to sit across the table from, or on a Zoom call. And you should be able to have that conversation and give them the unbiased truth and the opinion that you have of what they're currently doing, or what you're asking them to consider.
So, I this is an interesting topic. I think that no matter who you are, whether it's an insurance agent, a broker, dealer, a representative of a firm, or whatever financial position you find yourself in, your primary goal should be to put your client's best interest first. You shouldn't even need the title of a fiduciary. If you're not being a fiduciary for your client, then you shouldn't have a professional license to begin with. So, of any side, of any kind, So, I think that this whole, thing is kind of overplayed in a lot of sense. They make it sound like, like you said, they're the only ones that are looking out for your best interest, and that is true to a certain extent. And but it's also true that anybody that you're buying something from, or that is helping you with financial matters or insurance or whatever, should be putting your best interest first. I mean, that's like where I went back to with these simplified issue policies. If you know that you can sell your client a whatever it is, an accelerated underwriting policy, but it might take a little bit longer to issue versus a simplified issue policy that'll issue today. And it's, why would you're going to make a bigger commission by selling a simplified issue policy, because the premiums are going to be higher and it's going to pay you right away. Wouldn't it be a fiduciary responsibility for you to put your client's best interest first and let them go through fully underwritten or accelerated underwriting? I mean, that to me sounds like something that is definitely putting the best interest of your clients first. So I agree that this thing, it is overplayed, and they do tend to use it to make everybody else sound like they're the bad guy, when I don't really think that anybody's trying to be the bad guy. There's always going to be, lone wolves out there that, and bad players. Bernie Madoff was a fiduciary, right? So the whole thing is a little bit overused, exaggerated, I guess is the word.
Agreed. And lately in the news, let's talk about why this is a timely topic. And part of it is because the Department of Labor has now, for the third time, tried to pass a certain kind of fiduciary ruling regarding retirement plan advice and products to be placed. So that's why this is timely. The insurance industry has always been against it. I'll talk about why, because they can't seem to clarify it for the public to understand why they're against it. It makes it sound like they're just concerned about commissions, and that's not really the case. The fiduciary lobbyists, they make it sound like we want to make sure we look after the best interest of everybody, but they don't understand the implications of the consequences of what they're trying to pass. But right before we get into that, let's do the carve-out thing regarding criminal activity. Criminals are criminals by definition. You do not need a suitability standard. You do not need a fiduciary standard. It's funny. I follow a number of people on LinkedIn. Someone will say, they're caught doing a Ponzi scheme, or they've stolen premiums and fabricated insurance policies. I mean, this is flat out fraud, right? They're committing crimes, and they say if they were a fiduciary, that wouldn't happen. No, criminals are criminals. Right. In a way, if you're following gun law debates, it's the same kind of argument. They're saying if the person had a better background check or couldn't get a gun, they wouldn't have committed this harm. Sorry, criminals are criminals. They don't follow the laws. The only people that get harmed by additional gun laws are the citizens that are actually going to abide by the law. So we have to take that perspective. They think that, gee, if we impose this on everybody, we're going to protect everybody and protect the industry. It's just not going to happen. So carving out criminal activity, because a crime is a crime, whether it's embezzlement, fraud, grand theft, which is a charge that can happen if you're actually selling in someone's home. And there's different stories on that. So the thing about fiduciaries is that they keep saying that fiduciary and best interest are the same thing. And you keep seeing that in their advertising, but they're not the same thing. The fiduciary standard this is the legal definition. It is a duty of loyalty defined by the source of compensation, not outcomes for the client. So we need to play this out some more. Duty of loyalty defined by the source of compensation, not outcomes for the client, which means any time that I'm getting compensation outside directly from the client is considered a conflict of interest. And it has to be disclosed. And that's why when the Department of Labor was putting together their laws and such, they recommended that firms like insurance companies put together a form called a PTE, Prohibited Transaction Exception, which basically says, according to fiduciary duty, you're really not allowed to do this, but you know what? It is a legal exception as long as we tell you about it and we disclose everything about it. That's why, because it would be a violation of the duty of loyalty unless it is fully disclosed. And here's the interesting thing about the PTE forms. The companies don't want you to return it back to them. It's for the agent and advisor to keep on file for themselves. Well, when does that form come into play? That form comes into play when the client has such a problem that first the agent doesn't rectify it. If the client has a problem on a sale or on a product or whatever it is, there's steps to resolution. The first step is you got to contact the agent or the advisor. That's the first step. If the agent or the advisor is such a coward that they don't answer the phone and they don't return calls, they don't return the emails, the client is left feeling betrayed. And I've got a whole YouTube playlist on my YouTube channel with a conversation with Steve Savant interviewing Ilya Lerma. And Ilya Lerma is a prosecuting attorney who sues financial advisors and insurance agents. And the first thing that she says that when a client finally comes to them is the client feels betrayed in the relationship. Now, the next step for resolution is the client should be contacting the insurance company, and you file a complaint with their compliance or their legal department. Then if you don't get a satisfactory resolution from there, you go to your state's Department of Insurance, or you go to FINRA, or you go to the SEC, depends on what kind of product it is. And if you still don't get satisfactory resolution, then you get the attorneys involved, and you're going to sue for it. That's the proper thing. That doesn't matter whether it's fiduciary or suitability or anything else. That's the path of resolving a conflict if the agent, the coward, doesn't return your call. And if the agent doesn't rectify the problem, the agent should be proactive and figure out if they committed an error or an omission, which is what our errors and omissions coverage is for. They should be proactive in getting it fixed. But if not, they're the ones that open the can of worms for everything else. I could have sworn I heard a sigh. Like I needed, like someone wanted to expand on that. But you've got to be able to take proactive charge on that. Now, so regardless of that, I want to first do a quick shout out because I have another mentor of mine, and I was doing some posts in my Facebook group regarding unauthorized practice of law. And what's interesting about that, now that has something to do with living trusts, but it shared, I got a legal, was it legal opinion, not just opinion, actually it was a final court decision, Florida Supreme Court decision regarding duty of loyalty. I'm going to share my screen on this real quick because I want to actually read this out. So here it is. And by the way, this is basically saying that an insurance agent is not covered for doing legal activities like drafting a will or a trust, or even offering software that drafts a will or a trust. So, I shared my screen, but it did not go on the screen. Here we go. See, eventually I'll remember how to do all that stuff in real time. Here's what the Florida Supreme Court said. This was in 1993. It says the question posed by a petitioner also presents a potential conflict of interest for a lawyer employed by a corporation or other entity involved in the sale of living trusts. Loyalty is an essential element in the lawyer's relationship to a client. If in advising a client about the disposition of property after death, the lawyer must first determine whether a living trust is appropriate for that client. If so, the lawyer must then ensure that the living trust meets the client's needs. If the lawyer is employed by a corporation selling the living trust rather than by the client, then the lawyer's duty of loyalty to the client could be considered compromised. I added the word considered. Lawyer shall not represent a client if the lawyer's exercise of independent professional judgment in the representation of that client may be materially limited by the lawyer's responsibilities to another client or to a third party or a third person. Lawyers shall not accept compensation for representing a client from one other than the client unless, one, the client consents. There is no interference with the lawyer's independence of professional judgment or client-lawyer relationship, and information relating to representation is protected. In light of this duty of loyalty to the client, a lawyer who assembles, reviews, executes, and funds a living trust document should be independent counsel paid by the client representing the client's interests alone. Now, we can easily take that, and how do we apply that as a fiduciary? A fiduciary can only, other than being able to disclose otherwise, only offer those products and services which the client has accepted, and that compensation coming from the client. But the insurance industry is saying what? We get to earn a commission. We want to earn a commission. Well, the commission is by definition a third-party compensation. And so what the fiduciary lobby is saying is that should not be allowed, because that's going to influence your judgment, because you're getting outside. By the way, and they don't say how much is a problem, right? You could be getting, it's funny, you could be getting trips, you could be getting obviously commission comp, you could be getting merch, using the common term. If I had a tumbler from another company, I think I'd have to disclose that Athene gave me a mug. That would have to be disclosed, saying they gave me merch. I mean, to me, it's kind of stupid, but that's what the purest definition of that duty of loyalty means. You have to disclose all of it. And that's where they're putting the compensation ahead of outcomes that are potential for the client. I prefer to look at the actual outcome. That's what makes financial advice different, because we're not preparing wills and trusts. We are creating economic tools, financial instruments, and the combination of which, or the exclusive use of one, whatever it's going to be, to how it's going to greatly impact the client overall. And there isn't a one size fits all. It's what is within my professional judgment, and however I decide to get paid is how I'm going to serve that client. Okay, I just went on a rampage on that one. What are your guys' thoughts so far, so I can take a quick look at my notes here?
Well, I mean, it's just a, the way this has evolved over the last, X amount of years with the whole fiduciary rule thing. If you go back, if you've been in the industry, for any extent of time, look how this has just morphed into so much more than what it's really about over the last, I don't know. Let's just throw a number out there. Let's say, the last
8 years or so.
7 to 8 years. Yeah. I mean, something that kind of comes to mind with how this has evolved into so much more than what it should be is look at your suitability forms and look at different things that have had to be, restructured and to reformatted to for compliance reasons with every carrier out there from an insurance perspective, or an annuity carrier or whatever, to make sure that they're covering what they feel like are their proper basis for legal reasons. And it's just it's cost the industry an enormous amount of money, of dollars, to fight things that should really just be a common denominator among all those that are quote unquote fiduciaries, live by the FINRA rules, or those that are governed by insurance laws and different things. It's just it's the very reason why we kind of advocate for what we do, which is we don't really make recommendations to anyone. We just make you aware of the situation that you have and give you your options, and you're ultimately, you the client, you've got to make that decision. So if that's in your best interest and you like a particular way of a product maybe fits your need, then aren't you being a fiduciary? Don't you have their best interest in mind? I mean, it's just I kind of probably sound like a little bit of a repeat and a broken record with some of it, but it's just gotten way out of hand with how many people have got their hands, so to speak, in the cookie jar, wanting to say that you can't say this, and that you can say this, but you got to have this license, or you've got to have you've got to be with this broker dealer, or whatever the case is, to speak to it. What happened to the morals and the values of just telling the truth?
I don't know what happened, other than a wedge has been created to basically say, I'm better than you, and I can prove it because the law makes me. By the way, I'm going to say this: if the law has to force you to be a decent human being, you suck as a human being. Exactly. Fair enough, bar none. That's it. I don't care. You suck as a human being if you need the law to tell you so.
So I have the Medicare background here, so I'm going to relate this a little bit to Medicare. Maybe this will help some people. So with Medicare, you have CMS, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. And every year, they change these rules about how you can do enrollments and the certifications you need and the this and the that. And, you know, in theory, it's supposed to be in favor of the senior or the retiree. But in reality, just because you're doing a certain certification or or they're making the enrollment so that you have to have this cool down period or this or that, it's not necessarily of any benefit to the client. You're still going to have people that find a way around the rules. You're still going to have people that fill out falsify forms. You're still going to, no matter what you do, you're still going to have issues. So, and they've gotten so much more strict and regulated with all of this stuff over the last decade that I've been doing Medicare, that it really hasn't helped the agent or the retiree. You know, if anything, it's hurt both, because now you have a lot more steps for the retiree to go through, and you have a lot more steps for the agent to go through. So in one sense, regulation and oversight can be a good thing, but when you start to, you know, nitpick every little thing, it starts to really drag down the whole process and hurt both the advisor or the agent and the consumer as well. Maybe that makes sense. Maybe that helps. I don't know.
It's another perspective. And the thing is that government regulation does not always turn out the way that we want it to. And it certainly doesn't help our efficiency, that's for sure.
Right.
There's a lot more to it. So I want to go real quick about the 4 levels of fiduciary that Michael Kitces wrote about years ago. And he said the first level of fiduciary is having a Series 65. Now, what does that mean? What that means is not that someone who holds a Series 65 is a fiduciary in everything they do. It means that if they're in that role and you have signed an engagement agreement, you probably have an investment policy statement with that person, you're going to be paying a fee based on your assets under management or project management or whatever it is you're doing. They have a duty to you. And that's what the Series 65 represents. Now, you could also be working with a broker who still sells mutual funds and variable annuities and whatever else. And just because they have a 65 doesn't mean everything they do is under the 65 rules. And they keep talking about it. I'm not that smart. I just happen to know that the law says that if you are acting as a broker, you've got one standard, which is the suitability standard. If you're acting as an agent or as an advisor, then you have another standard. I don't care. I've got one standard. Can I make you better off? That's the only standard that I have in mind. I don't nitpick. I'm not that smart trying to balance. Hey, can I rip you off over here versus putting your best interest over here? No, I can't think that way. I've got one standard of things, which is, can I help the client be better off? The second standard is being a CFP holder, and as a CFP holder, everything you do is under a CFP standard. They have made a lot of press releases and a lot of things as they've increased their standard, especially if the CFP is if they consider themselves fee only. Now, when you consider yourself fee only, there's a whole nother standard on that, because you can't receive a commission of any kind. I've actually seen CFP either disciplined or revoked because they receive real estate commissions. And this was years ago. I remember reading this article quite some time ago. I'm like, that has nothing to do with financial advice if you're selling real estate on the side. But apparently they're trying to include everything. And by the CFP board is trying to make a name for themselves by saying, we're going to regulate all aspects of financial planning, including everything that our CFP holders do. That's why they do this kind of thing. Now, in that, I also put in parentheses the CFF, which is a Certified Financial Fiduciary designation. It was launched about 6 years ago. I hope that anybody that has the CFF understands that you're portraying yourself to the public as a certified financial fiduciary, which means everything we're talking about, you better be disclosing everything. Because if you get into a complaint situation, the attorney will rake you over the coals based on how you promote yourself to the public. So enough on that part. But the third one, the DOL fiduciary, we're going to be talking about that even more. But you've got to have, by the way, that law has not become enacted. Currently, it's being stayed in a Texas district court or Texas Supreme, whatever it is. The fourth standard is self-proclaimed. If you say you're a fiduciary, you're going to be held to that standard, particularly in a complaint situation. So here's the thing and because I've given private briefings on this topic and such, and the thing is that why would I voluntarily increase my professional risks when I'm literally in the business of risk management? Why would I voluntarily increase that for myself when I don't have to legally? Now, maybe one day it's going to get passed. I'm going to have to. I already have a plan for that. I'll talk about that later. But the other thing is, when is a fiduciary, like someone has a 65 or anything, when are they your fiduciary? And they're only your fiduciary once they sign an engagement agreement. Both parties understand the scope of their mutual responsibilities to each other, and there's a payment of fees, and that is called consideration. The consideration is where the duty of loyalty needs to lie, is who is the source of that consideration. So you might say, well, my advisor, he's a fiduciary. Did you pay a fee? How is the fee being calculated? How are you being charged for that? Fiduciaries are not free. And by the way, commissions aren't necessarily free either, but is that a material disclosure? See, I'm going to be talking in circles here. Because in fact, why are we against that? My biggest issue with the fiduciary standard is commission disclosure. With insurance products, here's the thing: that commission disclosure, it's not a cost to the client. That's the biggest thing. Was it 6 months ago or so? The White House came out with a thing that said we're going to end junk fees, or trying to limit junk fees. But with annuities and life insurance, there's no additional cost that's there. Our compensation comes from the insurance company. It's part of their marketing budget. They recapture that over a period of time. It's called a validation period. This is why during the first few years of a contract, you don't have full access to everything in it. Whether it's an annuity, you might have surrender charges and a surrender charge schedule that declines, let's say, over 10 years. If it's life insurance, you have increasing available cash values, because if you cancel too soon, the insurance company gets to recap some of those costs that they paid out. But it's not a direct cost. Now, how can I also say that? Is that if you contacted the insurance company directly, you said, I don't want a broker, I don't want an agent, I want to get my contract directly from the company, I don't want to pay commissions. Guess what? You're going to get the exact same product, the exact same design, assuming you get the right kind of people to do the work for you, but you're going to get the exact same everything. The only difference is the insurance company got to keep it. You don't have an agent. It's the only, because these are state regulated products. There's no additional line item for the commissions. It's already all built in. It is what it is. If it was an additional cost, and we talked about mutual funds a few weeks ago, like A-shares. A-shares have a direct cost that lowers the investment contribution in there. That needs to be disclosed. But with insurance, there is no cost like that. Therefore, to me, it is not a material consideration that requires disclosure. It doesn't make an impact. What does need to be disclosed? You need to disclose what the material fees are. So if you have an annuity, are you paying extra for a lifetime income benefit rider or any other additional optional riders? If it's a variable annuity, you got all kinds of other fees that just are all bundled in. For life insurance, it is with whatever is within the contract, however the contract is illustrated. So you need to know the risks. And usually with fixed insurance, it's not necessarily market risk, but it's performance risk, especially if it's an index type of a product. What is the potential return, at least according to the current year, because those things can vary depending on indexes and interest rates and such. What is the cost? Again, is there something coming out of your investment capital that is an actual cost? What are the terms and conditions? What are the taxable implications? All of that is a factor. None of that really factors in commission. My commission could be $1. My commission could be $1 million. It really doesn't matter as long as the contract properties and the whole thing, how is it implemented in someone's complete financial picture? Is it going to make the client materially better off based on the contract properties, whatever it is? To me, that's what's most important. So why am I afraid of commission disclosure? In the pension markets, commission disclosure has been that way since forever. You have to disclose your commissions. But in the pension market, and we're talking about corporate pensions, you're presenting to CEOs, CFOs, business owners, and that kind of thing. They're used to that. And they're also used to the fact that you're in business. You're here to make a profit. And the commission is the commission, whatever it happens to be. But in the middle income market, if someone has been working for a long time, let's say 30, 40, 50 years, and they're finally retiring, and they've got, let's say, $500,000. Now, I don't mind using this as a hypothetical. These are real numbers. But if someone retires with $500,000, and I determine that, you know what, a fixed index annuity based on all, let's assume that the whole thing is suitable, and I can put the whole $500,000 in there. I could get 6% of that up front. How much is that? 6% of $500,000. That's $30,000. Now, let's think about advocating and thinking about the middle income market. They might think, gee, $30,000. It takes them maybe 6 months to earn that much. You know, there's an element of jealousy that could come in. And then there's an element of, is this really in my best interest? If they can make this much money, am I sure that this is what's right for me? And yet 6% is a very standardized commission. That's not out of reach. That's not impossible. It's a very standard commission. And yet I don't want to create unnecessary conflicts within the client to prevent them from moving forward, as long as everything else fits. All right, you guys, I've been talking a lot. Come on, chime in here, guys.
Well, to your point right there that you kind of ended up with, I think if you do a good job with your client, and they bring up the fact of, how do you get paid, that comes up, more often than not. I mean, and you explain to the client the situation with the product that your recommendation is, or something that they feel like that's something that they would like to participate in and have a portion of their assets go toward. I don't have too many people that are against that. If they understand that the product that you're recommending is going to satisfy that need, and they're comfortable with that, then I'm kind of okay with as far as they want to take that conversation. But from the fiduciary side of it, you have so many, not every advisor, obviously. I mean, we don't want to throw everyone into the same bucket, but you have so many of them out there that just feel like, because they're branded with that word, that they can only give that advice, and their fees and their charges are more relevant than what you're, if you're an insurance guy or an insurance product that you're disclosing, it has more value to it. I don't see the difference there. I don't see how that one is really any different than the other. But at the same time, I just circle back to the client needing to understand what certain products do. And like you said, with annuities, for instance, I mean, so many of your middle market people, it's what Social Security is. Social Security is an annuity. I mean, it really is. I mean, you're getting a guaranteed payout at a particular rate, and 99% of the people that I sit in front of are going to gravitate toward that guaranteed side of things, instead of that up and down cycle of the market and the volatility that can only come from being invested, in products that are fee based, and that charge that an advisor gets a fee on, where your account goes up or down, he's going to make money. And the client's looking at it, like, hey, you're making money whether my account goes up or down, but I need it to at least do this. Can you guarantee that? And if they would spin that question back the other way, I think that they may have a different look. The client may have a different look at what they're actually, already currently involved in, or maybe look to something that has a little bit more of a guarantee, especially, for those people that are retiring tomorrow, for instance. I know that sounds quick, but I'm just talking about those that are in that short time frame. If you're 20 years old and you can afford to get into the market, so to speak, and ride some of those things out for the majority of your working years, that's a different argument. But for those that are looking for guarantees and stability, because of the way the market and the way the world is today, and inflation and different things, can you really afford to gamble with managed money if you've got $1 million, using that as your example? I mean, can you really afford to toss some of that out there, and roll the dice? Can you afford to do that?
Which goes back to the fact that fiduciaries put the method of compensation above the fact that that other products can have guaranteed results and guaranteed outcomes. So we're putting the outcomes ahead as opposed to they're putting compensation, and they consider it a material conflict of interest if there's any additional compensation outside of the client. So they're putting the compensation horse before the cart of what are we going to actually do and guarantee for you. And of course, they can't usually use the word guarantee. They're prohibited from even using that word unless they really can guarantee.
Yeah, and it gets also into the fact that you know the guarantees that are out there, they the fee based guys, they could do things differently. Those that choose to, they could do things a little differently within the product portfolio that they have to work with. But the thing that gets me on the fiduciary thing also is the fact that they're charging a fee on money that's not even theirs. I mean, they're making money on that. It goes back to being tied to the government and having control, and who's really making the money. It's the institutions and things like that. It's just that's my biggest beef, I think, with everything. They charge a fee on money that is not the clients and definitely not theirs.
Which means that they don't have an incentive to
Exactly.
talk about anything that could be a little bit more tax efficient. But if it lowers your investment balance, there's a conflict of interest there because they would get less income against that reduced balance. And that's a big deal. And so it sounds so good when they say, I'm on your side of the table. When you make money, we make money. Of course, when you lose money, we lose a little bit of money too, but at the same time, we're on your side of the table. There's other things that life insurance and annuities can do, both from a tax perspective and an efficiency of retirement income cash flow perspective, that managed money just cannot do. They cannot do it. Now, that doesn't mean you can't mix in managed money into some of these strategies. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that to ignore the potential that life insurance and annuities can bring, I think, is a fiduciary violation, but it's not because of compensation. It's because of outcomes that can be generated. And what is our duty? We want the best outcomes that we can generate for the client. And guess what? Insurance companies will pay us very handsomely to find people who need those problems solved. And I want to keep letting them, because that's my job. Let me find the opportunities. Let me help solve these problems. And I want to get paid very well for doing it.
It reminds me of a situation in our group where we helped one of our advisors helped one of their clients with a situation, and the client said, I hope you make the most money you've ever made on this. Why? Because he now had peace of mind, and he knew that what he was doing was the right fit for him, and he couldn't do anything better that would perform the way he wanted it to. He didn't care what the agent made. He hoped that the agent made a fortune. He wanted them to, because he understood the value of what he was getting.
Yes, that is the ultimate definition of a great client. When the client, now again, the client has to win first, right? We cannot do things at the expense or the cost of the client, where the client is going to lose and we win. If we look at the 7 habits of highly effective people, habit number 6, I think, is think win-win. And that's what you've got to do. You got to synergize. It's either synergize or think win-win, one of those two. Either way, those habits, those priorities should win in every interaction. But it should not necessarily mean that the client wins and I lose. I am not on the race to the bottom. I am not a nonprofit organization. I am here to do well for myself, but I'm not going to put my interests above a client's interest, which brings up, and I've got more talking points. And Alonso, I see your comments. I promise we're going to get to you, my friend. So I'm going to share my other screen, because every association worth joining in the industry has a code of ethics. So I'm going to start with this, because NAIFA, the National Association of Insurance and Financial Advisors, NAIFA members put the interest. Oh, I got to share. Just because I clicked, I got to remember to keep hitting that button. So NAIFA members, we put the interest of clients of their clients first. And there's a whole code of ethics here. And the whole thing is that we need to put the client first. Now, here's the next one, the American College. When you're a graduate of the American College, they have the professional pledge. I mentioned this on the podcast the other day. He hasn't published it yet. He has the RICP designation, Retirement Income Certified Professional. It's an offering from the American College. I quoted this poorly, but he didn't know that he signed it. Every designation holder has signed this. In all my professional relationships, I pledge myself to the following rule of ethical conduct. I shall, in light of all conditions surrounding those I serve, which I shall make every conscientious effort to ascertain and understand, render that service which in the same circumstances I would apply to myself, which is basically saying, let me get myself into your shoes mentally, let me understand your situation, but let me put my education, my knowledge, my thinking, my products and everything to work for you to make you better on your behalf. The IARFC, which I'm a prominent member of, I've served on a number of committees with them, their code of ethics. I will put my client's interests above my own at all times within the scope of my abilities. And at the bottom, I will give my clients the same service I would provide to myself in the same circumstances. The $1 Million Round Table. Now, they don't call it a code of ethics. They call it terms and conditions. But number one, always place the best interests of their clients above their own direct or indirect interests. Now, what's the consequence? If they are found in violation of those things, the main thing that happens with these organizations is their designations are revoked or their membership is revoked, things like that, if they're found guilty. They don't have the power to arrest. They don't have the power to convict. All they can do is say, you can't be a member with us anymore. Some people don't necessarily like that. They want criminal things. But if you're really a criminal, as we talked about at the beginning of the program here, if you're a criminal, you're going to be prosecuted. You're going to serve jail time, all that, because that's criminal activity, not an oversight, not a difference of the scope of advice. I got one more thing to share because this one's one of my favorite articles. Where is it? Oh, I have to stop screen and then present my other screen. Okay. I remember how to do this. Okay. This is an article that was in 2015, and this is called The Evolution of Lee Munson. It was in Wealth Management Magazine, and this guy, I just love it. And I'm connected with him on LinkedIn, but he doesn't post much. And he used to be, not only was he fee only, he was a member of NAPFA, the National Association of Personal Financial Advisors, and they are fee only. I don't even know if they're assets under management fee only. I think sometimes it's just you pay out of pocket for a consultation, which to me also means these people do not have any incentive to learn about life insurance and annuities because they can't get paid on it. It's considered a conflict of interest to get any kind of compensation on it. Therefore, it's automatically evil. And so that's what he said. He said, I was a NAPFA cult member. If it wasn't fee only, it was evil. But he found his new firm. He wasn't really able to offer the kind of holistic financial plan that he intended. I realized that I really wasn't hitting the mark with people. I wasn't really able to do anything other than manage stock and bond portfolios. It just wasn't satisfying to me. And it certainly wasn't satisfying to a lot of our clients. So offering insurance, he felt was a big way to close that gap. He partnered with Tracy Ann Miller, a charter life underwriter, hint, hint, who specializes in insurance consulting and financial planning. So after denouncing the commission model for years, he did an about face, ditching the fee only mantra in order to make money on the insurance side. Insurance now accounts for about 10% of his business. The fee only thing is a real disservice, Munson says. He compares it to Alcoholics Anonymous. Financial planners are basically saying they cannot be trusted to engage with any financial product that pays a commission. I have a problem and I can't control myself, so I joined this cult called NAPFA, and I have to tell everybody I'm not allowed to drive because I'll get drunk and crash. And that might be a slight exaggeration, but the fact is that's the fact. There's some people that are just so entrenched in this that I'm fee only, I'm only on your side because if I get a commission, I'm going to get addicted to it. I'm going to only want to hit my sales quotas and earn more and more money. And come on, where's the financial objectivity? If you can't trust yourself, why should the client trust you? I have a major problem with that. So to me, if we have a lot of financial professionals that will watch this, either they're watching live in real time or they're going to watch it later. I promote having the most flexibility in your business operations. I prefer, if you're going to have securities and insurance, be fee-based, not fee-only. Fee-based means you have the most flexibility to do whatever you want, but you can also do assets under management. You can also offer annuities and everything. Of course, you got to run everything by your RIA's compliance and everything else. Not saying ever to skirt the rules, but if you want the most flexibility to offer almost everything, that's the way I would do it. I would avoid fee only because I want my professional judgment to serve the client, not some arbitrary standard saying because you're getting paid this, you can't offer it. No, I'm going to use my professional job. I'm going to serve the client the best way I know how. Don't handcuff me. And in a way, heaven help them for anybody that does try to handcuff me, because I'm going to be the one to bring the standard to the client. That's what I want to do. And one last part here, because it is impossible to eliminate conflicts of interest. It is just not possible. So if you're a fee-only planner, what is your conflict of interest? Let's stack your calendar with as many consultations as possible so you can maximize your earnings. If you are doing by the project, the desires to minimize the thinking of your planning so that you can just churn out these plans, so you can be as the most efficient as possible. If you're charging a percentage of assets under management, you want to have a little desire from clients to, we talked about this, convert from fully taxable investments to tax-free investments, and unless they can pay the taxes out of their pocket as opposed to out of their investment, because otherwise that impacts your own cash flow. For commission-based products, yes, there is a conflict of interest. It could be considered a big one. The tendency is to structure a case to maximize our own commissions, but is that desire done in an ethical manner? And that's a little bit harder to judge. And I don't know how to advise the public on how to look for it, other than ask the agent and advisor how to prove it. Prove how I'm going to be better off. Put it in writing somehow. And I don't mean an illustration. An illustration, I was on a thing yesterday. The guy called illustrations or illusions. You never know all that stuff. But show me, what is it that I can reasonably expect out of this contract, out of this life insurance, but whatever it is. And that's one of the things that I happen to like about the way we work. I work with contracts that on a basis of what they will do, not necessarily on what they might do. Okay, that was a rant and a half. Any thoughts, guys?
No, I think you're exactly right with what you said about being a standard. For us, as involved in what we're involved in and what we feel like is in someone's best interest, I think if the majority of the advisors and the fiduciaries of the world would just take a deep breath and really focus on putting their client first with everything that they do, taking the fee out of it, taking the sale out of it. That's why our communication within our group is centered around that very thing. It's about communication. It's about educating your client. Let them make that informed decision after they've been given all the information. It would end a lot of the back and forth that's going on from the regulators on both sides, I think. And hopefully that there's the majority of those advisors out there who are giving that fee-based advice or that fee-only advice, whichever lane they play the most in, that they're doing it to a high standard that's both in the best interest of their client and themselves as well. So it's hard to draw a fine line with this is the way it should be, and it's because we've let it go so far. I think that we've kind of crossed that threshold that we may not be able to recover from. But at the same time, money and meetings are still somewhat of a face-to-face engagement with a human being that you should have their best interest at mind, and that's just kind of the way that I've always done things. That's the way I'll continue to do things. They're going to come first.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hate it when that happens. Yeah, I had a thought it was going to be so good. Okay, no, here's it. See, the thing is about our lobbyists on both sides. They keep using the term best interest, but they don't really clarify what the problem is. And this is why if the Department of Labor best interest rule let's call it that, if their version passes, it's against receiving insurance commissions unless the client authorizes it. And so there's an inherent bias that's being there. And yet no one talks about it that way. They say, well, the client's going to have less choice. And that's part of it. The question was posed to me the other day, which was, do you think that the costs of everything going to go up? I think it might increase a little bit of the agent's E&O because there might be a little bit higher cost of the possibility that a complaint may happen. That's a possibility. But really, the companies, only what the companies to do is manufacture good products. I want the companies to compete for the agent's attention and the agent's business. And this is why the annuity companies, their job is to cater to the agents. The agents will sell what they like to the client. And most of them are about the same. There's going to be some contractual differences, but here's the thing: the company has to make money, the agent has to make money, and the client has to be better off. All three make up the three-legged stool. And if one is out of whack compared to the other, we're going to go to other companies that are going to be a little bit more in line. I want the company to win, but the company's going to be the last to win. I want the client to win first. I want to be financially compensated well. And then the company is going to recap everything over time as long as I did my job well. But yeah, it's just the lobbyists for either side, they don't communicate what the real issue is, which is why I brought it up as a duty of loyalty regarding where the compensation is coming from. Because if the compensation is coming from any source other than the client, the fee only people can't do it. And they're automatically close themselves up. Can't touch that. Why would I work with an advisor that voluntarily chooses to not do certain things that could be in my best interest? I have a problem with that. I'm going through my notes. I went through a whole lot here, and I think I covered everything. So I want to get to Alonzo. Oh, go ahead, Mike.
No, yeah, I was just going to say, I think it was interesting when you showed that last article that you were showing. I did a little extracurricular reading after you finished on that page, and it seemed to me like it was. I can only read a part of it, and maybe I'm wrong as to what it's going to say going forward, but it seemed to me like because he couldn't collect any sort of a commission with his designation, that the board or whatever that thing is that he was with was recommending that he start charging a fee on insurance products that he sells. Now, here's the interesting thing, going back to your other point. That just proves that no matter if you buy the policy straight from the company or from an agent, it's going to be the exact same cost. Because if they can imagine that, you can be charged a fee, and the company is going to not only keep the commission, but maybe he gets a referral fee or a recommendation fee or a fee for whatever kind of a fee, for doing his work, and another agent writes it. So now not only are they being charged a commission on the insurance, but then they're paying this guy a fee on top of it. So, I mean, that was brilliant. That proved right there that the commission that an insurance agent makes is not costing you, the client, anything extra.
Yeah, it opens our eyes when we start to peel back the layers of some of this propaganda and start to see what the real truth is. And
I just thought that was really, really fascinating. That was their solution, was to charge a fee.
Yeah. Well, by the way, I have a fee schedule, and my fee schedule is based on analysis work, not necessarily based on my time. If I'm going to be doing business succession planning, if I'm going to be doing the business valuation, I'm going to be charged for doing that analysis. I'm going to charge the client for that. I'm going to charge the client for time to put together analysis and recommendations. But at the end of that engagement will be a plan assurance or a plan satisfaction plan acceptance document that the client will sign that's saying, I'm happy with what you've prepared for me. That ends the fiduciary engagement there, and the client is free to engage with any professional they want to say, can you implement these life insurance policies? Now, I'm pretty sure that 99.999% of the time they're going to implement them with me, because it won't take much for me to do because I already got all the information, no problem. But they can choose to implement them with anybody else they happen to choose. I don't see why they would, but they could. And so there's a defining line of time between here's the fiduciary engagement, here's the end of that. Now I'm going to put that into play for you. So Alonzo asked a good question. With suitability, why are there so many term only or IUL only guys who aren't being reported? Do you think we as ethical advisors have a duty to report them? And my opinion is that the insurance industry is still a business. It's an industry. It is not necessarily a profession. And so these insurance companies and field organizations, we all know who they are, and these are primarily recruiting organizations that's coming to my mind. Their job is to sell policies, and it becomes a money-making thing. I really hope that they would put their clients' best interests forward. I really hope that they're representing their products properly and such. Um, but who do you report them to? Because they don't do more things? That's a business decision. Just as it's a business decision for me, I have insurance only licensing currently. I could eventually be, either form my own RIA or join someone else's RIA. I'll never get with a broker dealer. Anybody's a fan of that, sorry. I am not going to do that, because if I do that, I'd have to get all of this stuff that we talked about approved by them before I talk about it and make it public. And I'm not doing that. So, but
Well, I think this is a brilliant question, right? I mean, who says that it's in the best interest of the client to buy term only, like some people promote? Why is that in the best interest of the client? Can you prove it? I don't think you can. And how is an IUL in the best interest of the client? I can prove 99% of the time that it's probably not in the best interest of the client, but there may be situations where it is. So, I mean, if you're going to say, carte blanche, buy term, invest the rest, well, okay, maybe that isn't in the best interest of this particular client, but some companies sure seem to think it is. So I think this is a brilliant question. I love this. This you could really go down a rabbit hole with this one.
oh yeah, we can, because some of it will be the race to the bottom of, I'm in your best interest because I charge the least commission and I charge the least in fees. And quite frankly, they think that's the ethical, moral way. No. And in fact, in my speech I'm giving to a NAFA organization here next week, one of the things I want every insurance agent to do is show people the maximum possible. You should be showing the maximum possible policy that people can have, and why. Why will the insurance industry let you buy that much policy? And it's not because we want your premiums. It's because of the protection components to it. Why can we do the maximum amount using the tax code? I want to show what the maximum possible. Can you usually do it? Maybe not. But I want to show people what's possible, and then you adjust from there. And let people know why they can do it that way. And Alonzo added another one. I know guys charge you only 1.4 AUM annually. Immaterial. It could be 0.5. I think his price, he was 0.5, 50 basis points as far as his fee. But I was with an RIA that charged up to 2.95%, depending on the allocation. So it depends on what you're managing towards and why and such like that. So anyway, we are pretty good. I was expecting to take more time, but I think we covered almost everything that was on my list that I wanted to actually get discussed. Fiduciary, especially fee-only fiduciary, has become more of a hoax. It is deceptive. It is not necessarily in the client's best interest, because it restricts the advisor's ability to serve for an outcome, as opposed to actually just serving based on their compensation. And by the way, one of the things, and if you haven't met with us, we can generally show you how you can retire using half the money that the fiduciaries say you need to have for the same cash flow. They can't do that. We can, but they can't do it because they're not allowed to, and they're not allowed to because of the compensation rules, right? So because they can't, we can't. This is where we win. So we're going to leave you with that tease on that. I want to thank everybody for listening in and joining in. And if you're listening to this later on, thank you for listening and subscribing. We'll catch you all next time. It will not be next week, but it'll be whenever our next one is. So we'll catch you next. Thanks.